Hi guys, it's Eric with 30by40.com. I wanted to do a follow-up video to the blog post that I did recently about choosing natural decking. And I won't go into the synthetic decking. I have my own opinions about that. I prefer to use a natural product, and whenever possible I prefer to use a local product. Here in Maine we have access to two types of cedar which are local materials. One is an eastern white cedar, and the typical dimensions of decking are 5.5 inches wide by 1 inch thick, and they refer to that in the lumber yard as 5/4 by 6. So actually when they plane the lumber and they smooth off the edges, it actually takes off some dimension of the lumber. But what you end up with is 5.5 inches wide, 1 inch thick, and as the corners are rounded over in decking, so that it's softer on your feet. So Eastern White Cedar is one product we have access to here, and the other product is called Atlantic White Cedar, and they're very similar. You can see it's sort of white character. If you leave them unfinished, which I recommend doing, out in the sun, they will weather to sort of silvery gray. And what's nice about these cedars is that they are very soft underfoot. Even though you can see there are a few small tight knots, and this grade is called STK, which stands for small tight knots. So you can see these knots. They don't come out readily, and they're not harmful under your feet. So in general, I really like this product a lot. It's great under your feet, feels good, and it's durable. The great thing about cedar is that it has natural tannins and resins in it that prevent it from rotting. And you know, if you can use this product without having to finish it, I think that's all the better. It saves time for you sitting on your deck, relaxing and enjoying it rather than refinishing it every year or two. So those are two types of cedar we have access to on the East Coast. Another product that I like to use is Western Red Cedar. And so if you live on the West Coast, you have great access to Western Red Cedar. And this is actually a smaller dimension board, but you get an idea for the character of it. It's a pretty tailored look. It's got fine, tight graining. This is a vertical grain here, which just refers to how they slice the log. You can see the grain is all sort of aligning along this axis here. It's got a red color to it when you first put it down, and if you put a penetrating oil finish on it, it'll preserve some of that red color. If you leave it unfinished, it weathers beautifully. It weathers again to a sort of light gray color. This, while it's soft underfoot, can splinter. So you have, that's a bit of a drawback with this material, but it does have all of the natural tannins and resins that the Eastern White Cedars have, and as such it's a very durable product for decking. Another cedar that is native to the West Coast is Port Orford cedar. And we don't use a lot of this here in the East. It's an appearance graded lumber. It's like a lot of the cedars. And so you choose this based on, you know, how clear this face is, and you can see this has one little tight pin knot in it. But for the most part, this is a very beautiful, soft, clear cedar. More expensive than the others, and you'll find that some of these cedars are becoming rare, especially the Western Reds. And if you have an environmental conscience, you'll specify it, you'll ask for it to be FSC certified, Forest Stewardship Council certified. And this just means that they monitor the plantations where these logs are grown for sustainable forestry practices. So you can feel good about where you're getting it. Another softwood that I'd like to talk about a little bit, there are redwoods too. We really don't use redwood on the East Coast here. You may be familiar with it on the West Coast. Again, it has great tannins and resins in it that keep it protected from the weather, and will be a long-lasting deck, and they use it for siding and all sorts of things. A lot of times you can get this material reclaimed. They used to use it in sort of olive barrels and wine storage tanks, things like that. Because it was a very durable and rot-resistant wood. Doug fir is this other softwood that I wanted to talk about. You can find this a lot in the Northwest. It's got a little bit more of an open grain, and again, appearance grading. You'll want to get something that is vertical grain like this. You can see it's very dimensionally stable. It's a nice looking wood. This will take a little bit more maintenance. Again, if you leave it unfinished, it will silver out. A little bit more tendency to splinter, but again, I really like this. One of the advantages of this is that it's a little bit cheaper than some of the cedars. So it's a step up probably from the Eastern White and the Atlantic White cedars. but a step down from the Western Red, the Port Orfords, the Redwoods, things like that. So that's another good option. And the last option that I want to talk about are tropical hardwoods. And these are great woods for their durability. They're very hard, they're dense woods. They're not as great for their environmental friendliness. And so if you have an environmental conscience, again, I would think twice about using this kind of wood. Again, you can specify FSC certified lumber to be used on your project, and that ensures that people who are harvesting this are not destroying the rainforest to make it happen, to make your deck happen. One of the great things about this wood, as I said, is that they're virtually indestructible. And you'll find that when you're trying to work with this wood, it has to be pre-drilled. It's very hard, it's dense, and it means that you can't drive fasteners through it without pre-drilling. And that oftentimes means a lot more labor. So on top of the fact that this is probably the most expensive wood, and this particular sample is Ipe, some people refer to it as ironwood. On top of it being the most expensive wood, it's also expensive labor-wise to install. And you're going to want to think about that when you specify this for your project. Once you get it down, it's indestructible. You probably won't have a lot to do with it. It takes finish okay, but I would recommend, again, leaving it unfinished, letting it weather. This weathers to a light gray, and if you want to get this sort of brownish tint back, all you do is lightly power wash it to get that back. So we've covered the different types of wood. I want to talk a little bit about and we talked about the size and thickness. I want to talk a little bit about fasteners. This is showing a trim head screw here, and there's various types of screws you can get. I recommend using stainless steel fasteners. They're highly durable. Screws are really simple to use, especially the self-tapping screws. They sort of drive right into any of these softwoods. Like I said, with the tropical hardwoods, you're going to need to pre-drill those. And again, I'd recommend using the screw over a nail as a fastener because it allows you to remove boards. If you get a cracked board or you have a board that has some imperfections in it, gets dinged over time, some imperfections, some sort of warping or cupping, something like that, you can just easily remove these screws and replace the board. And I also like the pattern that they give. So star drives, stainless steel screws here, trim heads. This is in the Ipe sample, and these show square head fasteners, which I particularly like. This is in a countersunk configuration, which you're going to sort of have to do with a lot of your decking if you're using screws. You don't want to sort of nick your feet on these. Screws have great holding power, and like I said, I like the way that they look pattern-wise. Contractors don't like the square heads quite as much because the torque factor on them is much lower. The heads tend to strip out a little bit when they're driving them. The star heads have a lot more sort of inherent torque. You can torque the screw a lot easier and it doesn't strip out. So that's another consideration to have there. And lastly, finishing. Like I said, I wouldn't recommend putting any finish on these. I think they look great without finish. I think they can weather over time and look a natural silvery gray. Most of these will weather to a silvery gray. And it saves on volatile organic compounds. It saves on your labor. It saves on, finishing time, all sorts of things. And I think your deck can look just great if you use any one of these natural products over time without a finish on it. All right, any questions, come to my website, 30by40.com. Feel free to drop me a line. Love to hear from you. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.